It's 2023 and Hogwarts Legacy did the impossible. It broke Call of Duty's 14-year reign and became best-selling game of the year. But here's what most people missed. It wasn't made by Rockstar or EA. It was made by a small studio in Utah best known for Disney Infinity, Disney's billion-dollar hit game where toys came to life on screen. But instead of believing in the game and the studio, Disney had other plans.
So, here's this studio that's made Disney a ton of money, and then they decide they're going to just close that studio down and get out of games about 5 months later.
That's Troy, former game director on Disney Infinity and former lead designer on Hogwarts Legacy, the man who saw it all firsthand. And I sat down with him to find out how a studio that Disney gave up on came back from the ashes and made the one thing Disney never really could: real gaming magic. But before we get to that, we first need to ask something else. Why is Disney so bad at making their own games in the first place? Well, because of E.T. Yep, the glowing finger alien who nearly killed the games industry. Atari's E.T. flopped so hard in the 80s, they dumped thousands of unsold cartridges in a landfill. It didn't just kill the game, it made the E.T. brand look bad altogether. And Disney saw what happened and took notes. Known IP plus technology equals kiss of death. Meaning, why risk a billion-dollar IP on a bad game? Better to not make games at all. And so Disney played it safe. In-house games, only safe bets, like Disney's Learning series. And licensed games, risky but very successful massive hits, all made by other studios. And guess what? That's when Disney started to get ideas. If other studios could turn their IP into blockbusters, maybe Disney could do it themselves. No more E.T. disasters, just profit. And so they flipped the script. Out with licensing and in with a new gaming division, new executives and new ideas. However, unfortunately, no new mindset. Everything was still so spreadsheet driven, or as an insider put it, buttoned up financially to an extent that was surprising. And it showed. Epic Mickey, Tron, Guilty Party, all cool games, but commercial failures. Pirates of the Caribbean cancelled after years of hype. The whole gaming division was literally unable to start and continue working on projects because higher-ups weren't sure of guaranteed returns. You could tell that Disney wanted the hits, but not the risks. And that mindset is exactly why Disney was about to walk straight into a billion-dollar mistake. Enter Avalanche Software, a small studio from Utah with one rare superpower. They knew how to treat an IP with respect. From Toy Story to Cars to Chicken Little, their games felt true to their worlds they built. And so I asked Troy, what was their secret sauce?
That is a great question. And Avalanche got into the habit of figure out what it is about the intellectual property that makes it so popular with the fans itself. So you try and become a fan of the property so that you understand it deeply like a fan before you do anything, right? So Avalanche's whole approach to it was understand that property from inside, just like you're a fan, before you start trying to drag it in any new direction or push it into a game.
And that respect for the IP, for the world, that's exactly what Disney needed. Avalanche was truly the perfect fit for Disney-based franchises. So how could Disney possibly mess this up? Well, buckle up. After Avalanche nailed Toy Story's popular toy box mode, Disney took notice. It was creative, open-ended, and kids loved it. So when Avalanche pitched their next idea, Disney listened. A game where every Disney character could exist in one shared universe. Great idea. And great timing. Because a brand new genre was just taking off, the Toys to Life genre. Games where you bought real figures, placed them on a special base and watched them come to life on screen. Everyone was in it. Activision, Lego, Nintendo, a billion-dollar gold mine Disney couldn't resist. So they stepped in with the biggest IPs, the most devoted studio, and a brand new game, Disney Infinity. Infinity 1 was a massive hit. The toys looked great, the concept was fresh, it was so good, Disney was already planning Infinity 2 and 3. And for a moment, it felt Disney's troubled gaming unit finally found success. But the writing was on the wall. If a company cares more about numbers than players, eventually you'll lose both. Oh boy! And so, with Infinity 1 booming, Disney did the most Disney thing imaginable. They overcorrected. For Infinity 2, they ramped up production so hard, warehouses were literally overflowing. Retailers couldn't keep up, parents couldn't afford it, and even the developers were burning out from all the corporate pressure. And I wondered, what did Avalanche think of all this?
It felt to me like rather than let's let the fans decide and let the gameplay be good, it was more like, if we get this checklist of things and if we hit all these numbers and we do it, well, according to our market research, you'll get 20% over your overhead that you put in, which will be great. So drop it in this quarter and everything will be fine. You guys can do that in development, right? That's pretty much how they did it. It was like, here's the numbers, here's where we want you to hit. Make it happen, development.
And they did pull it off, which only gave Disney one more bad idea. Squeeze harder. And squeeze they did, with Infinity 3. It had it all. Star Wars, hype, momentum, and it made Disney over $1 billion. What more could Disney want? Higher margins, of course. Despite the game's success, the high production costs were starting to outweigh the profits, and on top, the Toys to Life genre was coming to an end because kids and parents alike were tired of all the plastic. And to make things worse, Star Wars Battlefront, a game Disney licensed out to EA, was outselling everything. That one game with no toys and no supply chain was beating Infinity 3. Suddenly, Disney's beloved spreadsheets started to look rather grim. Growth was due to higher licensing revenue from the success of Star Wars, partially offset by lower Disney Infinity results. Translation, a game Disney didn't make was beating the one they did make. But the bigger picture was even worse. Between 2008 and 2013, Disney's entire gaming division had already lost over $1.4 billion. If Infinity does well, it bodes very well for the bottom line of this unit. If it doesn't, the opposite will be the case. And the opposite was the case. The bottom line tanked. And Disney did, once again, the most Disney thing imaginable. They pulled the plug. Infinity 4 was already in development, but hey, it didn't matter. Overnight, Disney shut down the game, Avalanche, and the entire gaming division, laying off 300 plus people who poured their souls into it. People were devastated, confused, blindsided. After a decade of buying studios only to shut them down, this felt like the final blow. We feel like we're better off managing the risk by licensing instead of publishing. Bob Iger's infamous line that hit like a smack in the face. And I couldn't help but wonder, how did Avalanche feel in that very moment the shutdown was announced?
That was a huge surprise, I think, both to me and to most of the other folks at the studio, because just a few months before that, they had a huge party for us out at the fairgrounds in Salt Lake City because Disney Infinity had been so tremendously successful and had made them $1 billion. And so, here's this studio that's made Disney a ton of money, and then they decide they're going to just close that studio down and get out of games about 5 months later.
And with that, Avalanche was gone. Or so it seemed. Because while most people thought this was the end, one fan didn't think so. And he was right. Their LinkedIn company page is called Warner Brothers Games Avalanche. A quiet detail, but a big sign. Because just a few months later, Warner Brothers had quietly stepped in to welcome the studio into the development stable. Same people, same spirit, same studio, just new bosses. And ironically, their first game to work on was Cars 3, a licensed Disney title.
It was almost like going back to the old studio with the same guys that had just made Disney Infinity. But now we're working, the Cars game was funny because now you were working for Disney as Warner Brothers, when before you were working as Disney for Disney. That was weird.
But Cars 3 was just the beginning. The team Disney just shut down was about to make gaming history. When Warner Brothers decided to bring back the Wizarding World, they didn't want another movie tie-in. They wanted something bigger, a flagship game. But after years of failed Harry Potter adaptations, no studio had earned that trust, except one, of course, Avalanche, the only studio in the world that could have done that.
Is there another studio in the world that could have done that? And I don't think there is. I don't think there are any other studios that have that experience with working with intellectual property such that you can satisfy the original owners while still taking it in a new direction. You know, in some places that hasn't been. That is really hard to do.
And because it was really hard to do, people had doubts. When news broke that Avalanche was making the next big Harry Potter game, the reaction was less, "Oh yeah, great studio," and it was more like, "Who?"
What I noticed was that when Hogwarts Legacy was announced and it was coming from Avalanche Software, there was a lot of it then when people were like, who is this goofy studio that just made kids games, right? That back then there was a lot of skepticism that a Disney kids game studio could make anything like Hogwarts Legacy. But I think internal to the studio, we were like, oh yeah, we can do this, you know.
Well, we all know now that Avalanche did pull it off, but internally, it was not a walk in the park. Executives pitched wild ideas like turning the entire castle into a menu system just to save costs. But luckily, Avalanche fought back and pushed to keep the world open and explorable, because what's the point of the game if it's not for this magnificent castle? And yet, the real battle wasn't creative, it was cultural. J.K. Rowling had become a lightning rod in the culture wars, accused of transphobia, boycotted online, and condemned by parts of the gaming press. So when Hogwarts Legacy dropped, it didn't just get reviewed, it got politicized. And Troy, he got caught in the crossfire thanks to an old YouTube channel with videos the press claimed were anti-feminist. Articles came out, tweets went viral, and suddenly Troy became the story.
Well, for me, yeah, I got personally called out. I think for the rest of the studio, they locked us down at Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, especially after it happened with me, was much more like, okay, you don't talk to the press, don't go and talk. There was a lot of focus on the game, stay away from all the controversies, and I know they were telling the people at the studio, stay out of controversy.
And Avalanche did. 6 years of silence, no leaks, okay, maybe one leak, but no more scandals, just one shot at proving what Disney never really believed they could. Hogwarts Legacy launched and was an instant hit. 12 million copies sold in 2 weeks, 850 million out of the gate in sales, and as of 2025, it sold 34 million units, making over $1 billion. It broke every record, Twitch records, Steam records, and it became the best-selling game that year. Avalanche did not just make a good game, they made a cultural moment. And I had to ask Troy once again, was this a moment that could have been Disney's?
Absolutely. I think Disney really made a big mistake by giving up on the Avalanche software. And to me, it's obvious, like, hey, they're the best-selling game in the world, guys, and what's Disney doing? Nothing over there in the game world. So yeah, I think they really messed up when they let Avalanche go. And it was a bit of, validation for, I think, a lot of the folks who felt, stabbed in the back by Disney when they shut down the studio.
And that validation wasn't just personal, it was historic. Avalanche had done what Disney never could, build $1 billion franchise from scratch and win the love of fans doing it. While Disney was, and still is, chasing deals, Avalanche is quietly building worlds full of secret, soul, and story. Rumor has it they're working on a sequel, only this time they're not just making a game, they're helping redefine the entire Wizarding world in sync with the upcoming HBO reboot. And something tells me it won't be short on drama. But drama doesn't rattle a team like Avalanche anymore, not after everything they've been through, because success doesn't die from failure, it dies from fear. And fear, that's what held Disney back. They had the IP, the talent, the shot, but no belief. Avalanche, however, did. And belief in the right hands is what turns games into real gaming magic.
I'm trying to think of something clever, but
Oh, no, don't worry. Nothing clever. It doesn't need to be clever. No, don't. It's just something from your heart.
You know what I want to tell people from the heart, and I've said this many times, is that I think that the gamers, the people who play games, need to understand that developers love you, right? The developer to gamer relationship should be much better than I think it has become in the past years. And I would really appreciate it, if we had more of what I felt we had back in the 80s and 90s when gaming was still getting its footing, and you would see your players as part of the whole process, because your players, you didn't have anything unless you had a player, and so you need players to be a good developer, and developers need good players. And to me, it was a cooperative artistic endeavor. We're working together at creating art. I wish we had more of that in the industry all the way around.